And the leaders of Democracy Investments are Julie Kane, the CEO, and Rick Rikorsky, who is the chief economist. And they are both here today to talk a little bit about how digital health and health tech is playing a role in this. It's interesting to see how, when we think about what is the essence of a strong democracy, it has to have a very strong healthcare system. We know this from the history of democracies, circa going back to the U.S. and then even as recent as 1947, when India came to be, and we saw and certainly India declared independence. It was around long before 47. We saw that healthcare and the public health system in India was critical for that democracy to become what it is today, which is the world's largest free market economy, and we're just the world's largest democracy. And so, Julie, tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing and all the good work that you're putting together.
Great to see you again, Stan. Thanks for having us. This is such a great topic because, interestingly, many analysts believe that social media is one of the main reasons for the decline in the health of democracy around the world. Our strategy is to leverage the Economist Democracy Index to very neutrally and systematically reweight an international portfolio to promote democracies and to we tilt away from authoritarians to encourage authoritarians to become more democratic, to get more capital as our fund grows larger. Now, I'm going to share my screen and share some data from The Economist. They have been tracking country democracy scores since 2006, and 2 of the 60 indicators that are incorporated in our strategy actually look at a country's freedom of electronic media. So this is the list of all of the 49 countries that do have free media. So they would get a high score in our strategy. These have electronic media controlled by the state, so they would not score so well. And then those that do not have free media at all, we get a very low score and are tilted down quite a bit. Now here we can see those that have restrictions on access, no restrictions on access to the internet. So these countries get a very high score in The Economist and therefore in our strategy as well. No surprises here. You can see those that have some restriction. These will get a middle score. And then here's who has complete political control of their scores. So you'll see in our strategy, we downweight the UAE by 62% and Turkey by Turkey also gets downweighted quite a bit. So I also have some data here from the Pew Research Center on looking ahead to the views of the digital spaces in the future. Interestingly, 60% are optimistic, while 40% are very pessimistic. So I'm going to start with the pessimistic views. These analysts worry that AI, which is driven by capitalism and geopolitical competition, will not be able to improve digital spaces in the future. So this view is that humans can't keep up with the change. The psychographic manipulation will continue. The disinformation that we saw during COVID, sadly, with the anti-vaxxers, that was quite disturbing. And while there needs to be more regulation and legislation, these views are not so optimistic. Now, the more optimistic views think that tech can be fixed and algorithms can be improved for future better spaces. And there can be expanded legislation and regulation, and the public can apply pressure to reform digital spaces, and we can shift away from the reliance on VCs and startups to create a more fair ecosystem. So I'm curious for thoughts. We've got a chat open. I'd love to hear what people's thoughts are here.
Yeah, it looks like someone would like to know both what you and Rick think about the recent inclinations of Congress to want to have more of a say on TikTok and what it's doing in the US.
Yes, it's well timed. And as a mother with two daughters who are very active on TikTok, I am glad to see the increased scrutiny there. Interestingly, it's the regulations the oversight is different in the US than it is in China. Rick, I don't know if you want to comment on.
Well, I think that part of the problem is social media is becoming a part of great power competition. And the methods that they use are very, very old. I think two people you have to talk about when you discuss how social media is weaponized. I think you need to understand Machiavelli and Che Guevara. Machiavelli basically says, if you're going to invade a country, you don't share language and culture, they're not going to greet you as a liberator. And I think Rumsfeld and Putin now know this. But that applies to more generic aspects of life. And Che Guevara taught that if you're an insurgent and you want to essentially overthrow a government, you need to find some inherent contradiction and latch onto that and exploit it, something that the government can never solve. And you're not going to solve it. You're just going to purge anyone who complains about it later, but because that's Che's way. But you have to find these contradictions. And our adversaries have taken advantage of this for decades. One of my favorite numbers is that during the Vietnam War, the Soviets put more money into the US anti-war movement than they funded the Viet Cong, right? I find that mind-blowing. So today you look at something like COVID, and they're exploiting divisions in culture, trying to tell people that vaccinations are bad. And one inherent contradiction we have as a country is that we pride ourselves on individual liberty, basically everyone doing whatever they want. And sometimes public health kind of needs everyone to buy into doing the same thing, right? That's what we saw during COVID. That's an inherent contradiction. And so we see this, and we see essentially social media being used to drive wedges between all these different populations and try to break us apart. And for better or for worse, the healthcare sector is 20% of our economy. So don't be surprised if 20% of the wedges are being driven into things which are public health related.
That's a fantastic way to look at this as well. So again, I think the idea here is as well, when we look at the importance of digital health, it is a platform where everyone has to do things that they may not want to have to do in order to help themselves. When you look at some of the health tech platforms that are out there, what are some of the things that you think offer the most promise when it comes to digital communications and digital media in healthcare?
Well, I think one actually that it's a little bit off of social media, but anything which detects fraud. Amazing stat, 20% of Medicare spending is fraudulent. And one of the biggest, if not biggest players in Medicare fraud is Russian organized crime, to the point that their revenue from that is on par with the Russian defense budget.
This is this is phenomenal. This is good to know, and certainly new learnings here too. And so when we are looking at at fraud, we're looking obviously in digital health at claims. We're looking at certainly during the opioid epidemic, during the opioid crisis, which they're still going through. Obviously, there's a lot of fraud there around script writing and around being able to obtain these kinds of class 3 pharmaceuticals that are highly regulated. And what other areas are you seeing around the world where you're seeing these sorts of frauds being perpetrated?
I'm not too sure about that, where else it happened. I'm sure it does. One of the interesting things is the parallel between how we code different medical services and how they did it in the Soviet Union. Uh, there was enormous medical fraud in the Soviet Union, and doctors were paid based on the specific service, and certain services they were uninterested in providing because it didn't pay very well. So organized crime in Russia refined these techniques, and basically just they're able to export it to any country with similar practices.
Interesting. And we saw this as well with medical technology during the smallpox campaign in the 1960s and 70s. We saw the Soviets, again, this is pre-end of Cold War, trying to import and spread smallpox vaccinations for free to Ethiopia, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, as a way of trying to eradicate smallpox and gain favor with these countries, most of them democracies in the 60s and 70s, as a way to curry favor with their leadership, as a way of trying to have these democracies flip into more communist favorable and certainly Soviet favorable regimes. And so along those lines, how does your fund help protect that kind of influence peddling? And you're seeing a tremendous amount of it now with a number of other authoritarian regimes around the world. How does your fund help address some of that?
By investing less money in those countries, they are less empowered to share their wealth. But yes, absolutely, it's important because healthcare has always been a critical part of diplomacy.
Absolutely, yeah. And there are entire books written about this, about the importance of medical technology in diplomacy. And there are a number of scholars that have written tremendous works in this area. In digital health, we should be all aware of this in this symposium today, that digital health is very much a part of these sorts of medical tenets, and it's an incredibly important part of it in a lot of ways, and it's incredibly diverse in geopolitical football in a lot of ways, since 80% of the U.S. digital healthcare system has software engineers based out of India. And so it's something where we have to understand that our digital health ecosystem in the United States is very much tied to the fortunes and the favors of the subcontinent. And so it's something to be aware of on a number of levels. And so when we take a look at your fund, how can we as a digital health community support democracy investments and the good work that you all are doing in trying to support democracies around the world through venture and investments?
Well, I would say, Julie, please.
No, go ahead.
I would say, first of all, just in general, when you do invest, think about the consequences of where your investment money goes. Obviously, if you're investing in international index funds, we would suggest our own. But more generally, just think about it. And when you invest in authoritarian countries, you're empowering them. So think twice about doing that.
And yeah, look under the hood of your international investments and see where you are invested. So many people don't know, if you're in a large international index fund, you could have Tencent and Alibaba in your top 15 holdings. Even the large international ESG funds have those two securities in their top 15. So especially with your index strategies, make sure you look under the hood and know what you're supporting with your dollars.
It's fantastic. And again, we are applauding you. You're seeing the virtual applause coming across with all the cartoon hands on your Zoom screen. And again, just phenomenal work. And again, I would just, I would really hope that everyone in the symposium today would reach out to both Julie and Rick and do whatever we can do to support these folks in any way we can. Connect them to your wealthy friends, your LPs, your limited partners that want to invest in funds and things like that, and spread the good word, because this is not only is what they're doing important individually, but if we can somehow harness this and have this ethic somehow or another extrapolated and somehow picked up by other major funds around the world, we are looking right now at a very serious threat to democracy, not just in the United States, but around the world. Only 36% of people right now on the globe live in a democracy, and it's shrinking every year. And so we have to be aware of that, And again, digital health is a big part of supporting those democracies, and we have to remember that as well. So we have a broader common goal here. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Rick, for joining us today.
Well said, Stan. Thank you.